Windows Server 2019 System Administration. Welcome back everybody. I'm Prakash Pradhan, your trainer for this entire series. In today's topic, we're going to talk about one of the important features that was launched by Microsoft in the Windows Server operating system 2012, that's known as a IPAM. IPAM is one of the important actually feature that was launched in order to manage many your DNS, your DHCP server, including your network policy servers and all via one centralized mechanism. That means centralized managing your feature, or you can take it as a tool. This IPAM is basically actually used to manage your different DHCP servers, different DNS, okay, different DCs, including your network policy servers. Normally in every organization we talk about having a one DHCP or one DNS. But when we talk about the implementation of IPAM server, it was actually implemented or introduced in Windows Server 2012 by Microsoft in order to manage the multiple DHCPs or multiple DNS. You just think this way, that in your environment you might be having multiple domains, okay, or you might be having multiple DHCP. Not only the multiple DHCP, inside those multiple DHCPs you might be having multiple scopes. Apart from that, you might be having your network policy servers. So there are two ways to manage your multiple DNS server, DHCP or network policy server. Number one, you need to have a remote access in order to have a control over many DHCP servers, DNS, NAT and all. Number one is that way. Okay, and this kind of monitoring or managing work, sometimes it might be tiresome or this tedious sometime. So in order to overcome this one, having a remotely controlled management of your multiple DHCP server, DNS, IPAM and all, Microsoft has another one option that we know as actually IPAM. But before that, as I was talking, you might be having another one way to manage all these servers by physical access to your device. Now, if we talk about the physical access over all these devices, that means again you'll have to visit multiple servers. And if you take it remote control also, remote desktop monitoring management also, still there will be many screens over your desktop. So in that case, in order to overcome all this kind of work, or including just distributing a workload in order to manage all of these servers, Microsoft introduced another important feature in Server 2012. It might sound odd, it might sound amazing, it might sound, in some cases for some people it might sound funny, that one feature is going to control the multiple roles. Normally what we think, what tendency, what concept we do have, the role used to control the features, but over here it's a reverse. That means this is IPAM is a one feature, it's not the server, and neither you are going to find it under the tools. Okay, now if you implement or if you install this IPAM server feature, that IPAM server feature is normally used to have a control, monitor, okay, completely over your DHCP or DNS server. It sounds amazing. Okay, so let's see how this works actually. Normally every DHCP that you have in your environment or DNS, okay, that will get broadcast and it will be automatically get into its console by this IP server. If I take you to this screen over here, if you have a look here, IPAM was introduced in Windows Server 2012. And IPAM is an integrated suite of tools to enable managing and monitoring of DNS and DHCP. But don't forget, it is used to manage only your Microsoft environment, managing your all these kind of features and the roles. Normally DHCP and DNS, you cannot implement it in non-Microsoft environment. And IPAM actually automatically discovers DNS and DHCP. It's an amazing feature. Automatically it's going to discover your DNS and DHCP server in your network in order to manage all these servers via centralized monitoring, one of the important feature. So when we talk about monitoring management of all this DHCP and DNS server, definitely we are going to talk about the database. That means managing all this, keeping a record of entire these things, definitely it has to go through the database. So there are two options. Okay, there we are having the two provision over here in order to have implement or access over this DHCP or DNS or this NAP your database. Number one, using internal database. It's not mandatory that every system administrator, whoever are using these things or implementing IPAM or any other thing in a server environment, they don't need to have a detailed information of the database. any database app. So in that case, the one who is not having a detailed information how to use a database, they might be using internal database. That means they don't have to have any idea of this database. They just simply monitor, implement the server, whatever database management was required in order to monitor all these things, keep a track, keep a record of entire these things. They are going to be installed automatically, managed by the internal database. Number two, if you think your infrastructure, your architecture, your environment is quite large and you need to have a complete management of all this database using a SQL Server, in that case, thanks to Microsoft, they do have option for the SQL, but it's not mandatory for all. If you are going to implement this IPAM in a small environment, definitely you don't would like to, that means I mean to say you do not want to go to the SQL. Okay, if you want to implement in a small organization, you go to the internal database. If your organization size is larger, we are having a maximum DNS, DHCP, NAV server and so many other things. In that case, I suggest you to go to the SQL in order to take this load easily. Now, we have certain specifications in order to use the IPAM in your network infrastructure. Number one, it supports only Microsoft DC. As I told you, Microsoft Domain Controller, not non-Microsoft element. Windows 2008 and above, you might be wondering, I already said that it was introduced by the Microsoft in Server 2012. Then why did I say this supports only Microsoft DC or with Win 2008 and above? That means DHCP or DNS might be in your server 2008, but that will be monitored or managed, okay, have a complete management console using IPAM. Next one, it supports in a single AD forest. You cannot think of implementing so far till this date. Okay, so far I know you cannot implement this one in order to support the multiple AD forest. It's only for a AD forest. Number three, specification, cannot install IPAM in DC or DHCP server, because DC and DHCP server is actually used to monitor via IPAM. Now, what if you forcefully try to install this IPAM in a server having a DC and DHCP? Trust me, the role will be disabled. So that's why don't do this. Okay. Now, does not support non-Microsoft elements. As I already said that it is completely made under the environment in order to deploy, to manage the DHCP and DNS and the NAV feature of this Windows server. So that's why it is going to support only Microsoft element. So if you have a curiosity, if you have some questions regarding that how many DHCP servers or DNS server it's going to support via this IPAM, so far till this state IPAM supports 100 DHCP servers. Trust me guys, it's more than the number of servers that you are going to manage or support in your lifetime at a time. So it supports 150 DHCP servers till this state. Not only that, 500 DNS servers. And you might be wondering then how many scopes? More than 1,000. It might be 4,500, around something like that. It supports. Okay. Now, if you have to see the prerequisite of implementing the IPAM server in your environment, definitely you are going to have one DNS or DHCP or NAV. At least one your element has to be over there. So that's why, let's say in this environment, I have created a simple image. There is no complexity. Now over here, we are going to have one server where the DNS and DHCP will be installed. That is already installed. Now I'm going to use another one server that's a standalone where there is no Active Directory roles, okay? No DNS, no DHCP, nothing. I repeat again, do not install any of other roles in the server that you are going to implement in a form of IPAM server. So that's why it's better if you have this standalone, because it's going to discover automatically. Remember I said that one point, DHCP and DNS or including the NAV, it's going to be automatically discovered by this IPAM server. That's why it doesn't work in non-Microsoft element. And of course, in order to implement this, we are going to have a client. So client, even if you have one, it's enough for us, because our concern at this moment is not to see how these things are going to be implemented in a form of IPAM server in a client. Client has nothing to do with. Why? IPAM server is used to manage the server roles, not a client. It has nothing to do with the client. This is just for the one specification, or in terms of this prerequisite, I gave an image for the client. So without wasting your much time, rather than having a use of the talk, so let's see how we are going to implement, how we're going to install, and how we are going to monitor all this DHCP, DNS, and NAV sitting in a console of this IPAM server. So for that, let's go to our server where I'm going to install your IPAM server. Okay, now if you have a look over here, this is my server. Okay, so I'd like to show you my server is ping. This is my server. IP is 100. Okay, now if I go to my this operating system, it's a server 2019, of course. Okay, it's a server 2019 operating system, and this is there is nothing. If you have a look over here, I'd like to show. See, there's nothing. Just a simple OS is installed, and it is most probably joined in a domain controller, nothing else. Okay, and it does have an access in terms of your connectivity with the domain controller. Okay, so let's say wiretech.com, it's a domain, so it's responding. That means there is no issue with the connectivity. That means they are in the same subnet, they are in the same network, so they can communicate with each other. Anyway, it's your IPAM server is going to have a discovery automatically to the DHCP or DNS server, over which we don't have to worry. So let's see how to install the feature of your IPAM. Okay, let's the things get on. So I'm going to add a role. Remember, this is not role, this is a feature. So you might be searching your IPAM server role, it's not there. So IP address is this, it's a member of domain, it's a kind of standard. There's nothing installed over here, standard edition, it's simple. Okay, now if I have a look over here, these are the roles. There is no IPAM server role over here. See here, there is no IPAM server because that no role, because that's a feature, as I already said. See here, we are in a feature list. Now see, IP address management service. Now if you have a look over here, if I select it, you see so many other additional services are going to be installed in order to have a complete control or manage your IPAM server. So it's better you do not play with any of this, let it install, because these are the requirement actually in order to implement completely over here. So it's done. Next, and install. It's easy. Okay, now don't forget, quick review, we use IPAM server in order to manage your DNS, DHCP and your NAV server actually from one centralized location server. It will be easy for you to manage so that you don't have to run, or you don't have to have physical access. Physically, you don't have to have presence in your multiple servers. You don't have to be in your server room, or you don't have to be in any of your environment where these different rules are being installed. So the multiple servers, that means multiple DNS, okay, multiple domain, multiple DHCP, multiple NAV, it can be easily managed and monitor sitting in your IPAM server. So let it install. I don't think it's going to take a bit long. So since I told you last time also, I have many virtual machines in my one OS itself, so that's why it might take some time, a bit longer, but I don't think it will take more than a minute. So let's wait and let it complete full installation of this feature. Don't forget, we are simply installing a feature. Configuration is so far, we have 6 steps. Might get shocked by saying these 6 steps are there, 6 configurations are there, but don't worry, it's not so much this difficult. Okay, this is just a click, select, next, it's the same thing. The most important thing or the beauty of this IPAM is that it will give you the console. Okay, it will give you the console through which you will be able to manage the different DNS, your DHCP, NAV, all those things. So let's wait for a few more seconds. By the time it installs the feature, then we'll continue. Okay, now congratulations. This role of the, sorry, I mean to say the feature of this IPAM has been successfully installed. Now we are going to configure the rest of the thing in order to manage your DHCP or DNS or your NAP via this IPAM feature. Now, as I told you last time that if you have a look in tools, there is no IPAM. See, it is not going to be listed under the tools. Okay, now see, it's in a left hand side over here. If you see in a dashboard, this is IPAM. And as I said, there are 6 steps that has to be followed, configured in order to completely manage your IPAM server. So first one is your IPAM server connectivity. See, as I told you, it does discovery automatically of your server. That means the DNS or DHCP server. It has already connected to the IPAM1.viatech.com. That means it has already discovered the viatech.com. Now the next step is to provision the IPAM server. Now let's begin with the number 2 configuration over here. So click this provision this IPAM server and we'll continue. Now over here you see, go through this. I do understand that when we start working in a server, there are many documentation, okay, the information that people might ignore, but I do suggest you to go through this. So it's saying the IP address management provides the centralized management, monitoring and auditing platform for IP address space and corresponding infrastructure servers on your network. IPAM provides this functionality be accessing the following Windows server. Remember, I told you these are the things we are going to manage now. DHCP server is going to be managed, okay, DNS server, NPS and Active Directory domain controller itself. So these are the things we are going to manage via this IP address management. Okay, so next. Now over here, if you remember last time I told you in the theoretical portion that when we install this IPAM server via your feature, it's going to give you 2 options. Either you are going to use the internal database of this Windows operating system, or number 2, if you have your SQL Server in your environment, you can select this as well. Okay, for in my case, of course, we are going to implement it in a testing lab environment, so I don't want to mess up with this SQL Server. So let's go ahead with the internal database, and trust me, it's going to be easy for you also. Okay, next. Now this is the important portion over here. When you go for this provisioning method of this your IPAM server, it gives you 2 options. One is the manual, second one is the group policy base. Trust me, group policy base is better than your manual configuration or this provisioning. So that's why I suggest you to go through this GPO name prefix. But don't forget to remember the name, because in having the name that you are going to provide over here in a GPO prefix, this named policy will be generated in a domain group policy automatically in group policy management. Okay, there will be 3 policies that will be generated. Okay, so let's say in my case I'm going to give a name over here, IPAM hyphen viatech. Let's say this is my GPO name prefix. Don't forget this name you will need. Okay, IPAM hyphen viatech, the name I have given over here as a GPO prefix name. Next, see, I told you these are the 3 things that is going to be created automatically. These settings will be applied on managed servers using the following GPO. IPAM viatech DHCP for DHCP server, DNS for DNS server and NPS if you do have for this. Okay, so let's continue with apply. Let it complete. Then before we move to the third option, okay, we need to go to the PowerShell and hit with the script. Okay, small script is needed over here in order to invoke this completely so that a server will get listed. Server, group policy, entire thing has to be updated in your domain controller itself along with the IPAM server. So that's why you need to go to the your PowerShell and hit the script. So let it install completely. It's in progress. Wait for a few more seconds, then we'll continue. Okay, it's already installed now. That means IPAM provisioning completed successfully. So these are already created. Now, after this, before we go to the, configuring the server discovery over here, if you notice over here, connect to IPAM server, it's already connected. Number 2, provision the IPAM server, completed on this, it is done. Now configure server discovery, it is not done so far. But before that, okay, before doing for this one, you need to go to your PowerShell and hit a command, without which it will not function. So let's go to our PowerShell over here, and then we are gonna hit one command. This is mandatory, without which this IPAM server configuration, that means this configuration of IPAM server is incomplete. So let's go to PowerShell, okay, and then we are going to hit with the command. Okay, now the command is, let it come over here fully, okay, invoke IPAM GPO provisioning to your domain, which is your domain, in my case biotech.com, okay, and then GPO prefix name. Remember the last time we gave a GPO prefix name, IPAM -biotech. If it is wrong, trust me, you're gonna stuck over here only. Now then, IPAM server fully qualified domain name. Okay, now I need to know the fully qualified domain name of this IPAM. In my case, the server that I'm going to use it as your IPAM server, I need to type the name of that server. That means IPAM1. So over here, IPAM server fully qualified domain name is IPAM1. Okay, IPAM1.biotech.com. This is the fully qualified domain name of your IPAM server. Okay, now and then delegated GPO user, who's that? Administrator @biotech.com. It's gonna invoke now. So wait for a few seconds. Normally it doesn't take this much long, but as I told you that I have got a many, this multiple servers are running in the background at the same time, so that's why it's taking time. So don't worry, in your environment it might not take that much long. It's running in the background, so it will give you the result now. Okay, now it's asking you, see over here it's saying the invoke IPAM GPU provisioning command, it creates the link. Remember, it's gonna create a link in a group policy object. Those 3 group policy objects that we created, it's gonna link in your main domain controller, actually in your group policy. So that's why it's trying to make sure, would you like to go for it? Obviously we'd like to go for it. Now it's provisioning IPAM, it's validating all the parameters, then it's gonna create or the link 3 group policy objects in the domain indicated by domain over here. So it's giving a certain error. So let's identify what is the error over here. There might be some spelling mistakes, so that's why it's doing like that. So invoke IPAM GPO provisioning your domain. Okay, let's see over here spelling. Invoke IPAM GPO provisioning. Okay, domain is viatech.com. That is okay. GPO prefix name is IPAM hyphen viatech. That is also okay. Okay, and then IPAM server FQDN. Okay, IPAM server fully qualified domain name. It has to be IPAM server fully qualified domain name. Over here, if you have a look, okay, IPAM server FQDN IPAM1.viatech.com delegated GPO user administrator @viatech.com. So what it is saying, the error over here, let's try. IPAM GPO provisioning domain viatech.com, GPO prefix IPAM viatech. Okay, this is okay. Where the things went wrong, let's see that. Invoke IPAM. Oh, okay, let's do this way. If I exit from here and if I go again to my PowerShell, right click, okay, run as administrator, and then we are going to type the same command. Invoke IPAM GPO provisioning domain viatech.com, GPO prefix name is IPAM hyphen viatech, and then IPAM server fully qualified domain name is IPAM1.viatech.com, and then your delegated GPO user is administrator @viatech.com. Yes,